Good morning. We're very happy to be here today with Mr. Jorge Perez. I would like to really welcome you to AI. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And we would like to ask you a few questions because you have this very inspirational life trajectory. And my first question would be, how has art contributed to your personal and your professional life?
I think, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. Madrid is my favorite city outside of Miami in the world. I would say that if I didn't live in Miami, I would live in Madrid. It's become a spectacular city. So I'm a businessman by profession. And when you're in business, your thought process is very different than the art thought process, I consider. Art makes my life more complete. It lets me think in very different ways. I think artists explain the past, the present, and the future in very different pictorial ways as opposed to the history books. And for me, being Latin American that lives now in the United States, art was a way to maintain my roots. My Latin American roots. So it not only allows me to maintain that connection with Latin America, which is very important for me because that's where I grew up, but it also allows me to think in very different ways. And art and humanities, I think I encourage, for example, my children, 3 of them have graduated, had gotten their master's degrees and so forth, and I have a young one now that's 20 years old. I encourage them to take humanities and the arts because I think it expands the way they think. It allows you to look at the world and at business even, in ways that are much more generalized, I think more creative, as opposed to purely the mathematical part of the business, So it has improved my life tremendously, both personally and in business. And we also incorporate art, because it means so much to me, in all the projects that we do. Thinking also that art makes people more complete.
Excellent. That helps me bridge very naturally to my next question, and it's, what was your inspiration and rationale to do so much to make Miami such a significant art center for the Americas and beyond?
Yes. So Miami, when I first came to Miami, my parents first brought me, I think when I was like 15 years old, and then I started university in Miami. Miami was what I would call almost a barren city, a classical American city in which at 5 o'clock everybody left downtown and lived in the suburbs. So when I studied urban planning, I thought civilization started in cities and grew in cities because the exchange of ideas that people have in close proximity to each other. And I love the European model in which you live and you work and you have pleasure all within close proximity, which was the opposite of the model of Miami and LA, Los Angeles and so forth, in which suburbia was very, very important. So the arts, of course, is part of that. And I always felt that there was no great city without a great museum, without great cultural facilities. So if you take Madrid, London, New York, San Francisco, Paris, all of them have great cultural facilities, all have great museums. Miami didn't have any of that. Miami was a tourist city. So Miami was a city in which people really came during the winter. They had a very good time in the beach and in the great hotels with Frank Sinatra playing and then they left to their cities. So they never considered Miami their own, even the people that stayed there. And I wanted Miami, since I made it my home and I decided to stay in Miami after I finished university, I thought that without the arts, it would never achieve a status of being an important, a serious city, as opposed to more a fun tourist city. So because of that, I started collecting art, not just for myself, but always with the intention that that collection was going to go to a great museum. And I was fortunate enough that they were nice enough to name the museum after me, which was actually the first and only museum in the United States that was named after Hispanic, which was very important to me because I felt that we take a lot from the United States. I came to the United States with not a penny in my pocket, scholarships to go to university, and it was very welcoming, and it allowed me to do what I've done. And I felt philanthropy, which is not big in South America, needed to be adopted by Latins. You know, we are not very good as Latins and Latin Americans and Hispanic Americans, South Americans. We're not good at giving back to the community. So this was a way, for me to give back, and I do philanthropy is a very important part of my and my family and my corporation, but we take a large part of that philanthropy and give it to the arts and humanities to try to make Miami a city that is known for its culture. And we've done, I think, a very good job in the last decade in particular, with Art Basel coming to Miami, with the museums and the performing arts centers. And that has allowed, because before the corporations wouldn't come to Miami, we had some of the banks that were international banks, but not the large corporations. And in the last decades, many corporations are choosing Miami because it's not just a beautiful city with beautiful climate, but it's now a city in which the employees can use all these great cultural facilities, great restaurants, and so forth. So the art in the creation of that city was extremely important to me.
Well, I mean, you have a very inspirational story and a very strong philanthropic trajectory, which bridges me again very easily to my next question. It's, what was the final motivation, let's say, to sign the Giving Pledge, which is a very, very strong commitment?
Yeah, so even before signing the Giving Pledge, I have parents that were very, very wealthy and lost all their money in Cuba due to the Castro regime. My parents were Cuban. We just went from Argentina to Cuba, and 6 months later Castro came. My mother was a pro-Castro person, so was my father. My mother was the more intellectual of the two. And even when they lost everything, and literally everything, and we had to go to Colombia for an exile, my mother always said we can't have societies in which there are the very, very wealthy that have more money than they know what to do with, and people that are literally starving. So she was very influential in that sense of giving back, making, I call it, an equal playing field. I can take a horse to water, I can't make him drink. So what I try to do is give people the opportunities, to be able to compete in our society, to be able to feed their children, educate their children, to have a life that's sort of the American dream, which was very much what it was for me. So I had a dinner with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. They asked me to go to dinner and explain to me what the Giving Pledge was, and I signed. You send a letter, and it's very funny because they pick a few ones, and I was the only Latin American, the only Hispanic in the Giving Pledge, which shows you, the giving. Now I think there's two, and we write a letter. And the Smithsonian, which is a large museum there, now has a big exhibit on philanthropy. And one of the rooms, I was very fortunate, I guess, was dedicated to me. And they have the letter that I wrote expressing why I joined the Giving Pledge, And it goes back to the making society more just. I was very, very lucky. I worked very hard, using my luck. But I was very, very lucky in the opportunities that were given to me to achieve economically what I have achieved. And I thought it was an obligation, to give back. So when you sign the Giving Pledge, you sign that over 50% and more of your wealth will be going to philanthropy. They don't tell you what type of philanthropy. It could be any type of philanthropy. Some do medicine, some do homelessness, some do art, and education is very important. And it was a commitment, to me, to society. But it's a very selfish one. People say, wow, that you're so generous. And I said, no, I'm very selfish. Because what makes me happiest is to see the achievement of small cultural institutions, children, people that do not have access to many things, to see how their lives change because of what one is doing and contributing to. So the Giving Pledge has been very important to me. Bill Gates is an amazing guy, and his wife, they're amazing people. They do these conferences, 2-3 times a year, in which we all get together and discuss the commonality that we have in our giving, which way. And we are very professional in our giving. So I treat it like a business. So people apply, for an arts part, different types of art. They apply for education, for example, and we have experts that help us decide which programs, where we're going to give the money to. And we give millions and millions of dollars every year, but we select them very carefully and we check them very carefully. So you say, if you have a program that is going to teach or send the theater to schools, and you're going to go to 30 public schools to present during the year, every quarter we check to make sure that the people are doing what they're telling us they're going to do. And if they don't, we cancel them out and look to put the money in. So we're very, very good at following up, studying very hard. We have a very bright group in our family philanthropy, because we don't want to just write checks and not know what is being done. And many people are just, and that's what they do. They have no idea. They write a check to a university or something like that. We study, just like in art, I study art, before I buy it. We have every application in the world, that tells us the artist, the year, the price, etc. So we treat both a little bit like a business. We're very research-oriented and results-oriented in our approach to both philanthropy and the arts.
Well, Jorge, thank you so much for this very, very inspirational talk. I think this was, very inspiring, not only for the I community, but for society. And we look forward to welcome you again in I University very soon.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.